This week's Foodie Friday, Monster Hunter Iceborne. Monster Hunter might have massive weapons and even bigger monsters, but I mean, look at this meal. After a lot of research, I found out that Meowster Chef did not leave us with a prep guide or recipe list, so we're gonna make our own, and it's gonna be delicious. We're gonna start with the pot roast. I'm gonna use about 1 to 2 parsnips peeled, about 6 carrots, and a ton of potatoes. And the reason why we need a bunch right now is because we're gonna wash all of them at once and peel most of them for our au gratin potatoes that we're gonna make later. Make sure you give those dirty spuds a good washing. And since we're peeling these ahead of time, make sure you have a nice bucket of water to keep your potatoes in so they don't oxidize. The reason why I'm doing everything ahead of time is so that way I can just get all of the peeling out of the way and we don't have to worry about it later. Work smarter, not harder. Now time to make the chop. For these, we're gonna do a rough chop on most of the vegetables with my, oh god, the knife is so sharp. Go watch my knife sharpening video. We're also gonna julienne some of these onions, and these are gonna be reserved for the au gratin potatoes later. We're also gonna medium dice a couple of the onions just to use them for our soup for later. Now we have the mise en place for the pot roast. We also have the mise en place for the soup and the mise en place for the au gratin potatoes. Now, as far as the potatoes go for the pot roast, you don't want to chop these up too small. You do want about a medium to large dice, just so that when everything is cooking together, it doesn't turn into mush inside of your pot. The same principle goes for the other vegetables, the parsnip as well as the carrots. You don't want them too small, otherwise they will just fall apart. Now we're gonna get some good on this steak. I'm gonna start off by using about a half cup of flour, and this is also going to help thicken some of the broth later. We're also gonna add 1 teaspoon of allspice, 1 tablespoon of paprika, a solid tablespoon of salt, 1 tablespoon of black pepper, and about 2 tablespoons of granulated garlic. But now for the secret weapon, some Szechuan peppercorns. Now you can leave this out, but I love the flavor, so I'm going to use about 2 tablespoons and crush it up into a nice powder for this blend. Get your hands in there, swirl it around, and make sure everything's fully incorporated. I took my massive, really cheap cut of chuck roast and just kind of rinsed it off a little bit, but this is also going to allow all of our beautiful spice mix to adhere. Now, like Emerald always says, if you're going to eat both sides, you should season both sides. And I mean all the sides, like get all of the sides. And in your favorite stock pot, I'm using this Dutch oven. Hit it with a bit of oil, get it to about a medium high heat, and sear that bad boy. After about 5 to 7 minutes, go ahead and flip this thing over and look at that. Just listen to this. You do want to make sure you sear every side because this is a big piece of beef. Once you have everything looking super sexy and seared, we're going to actually remove it from the pan and let it rest for just a minute. We're going to start adding in all of our mise en place for the actual pot roast. Your onions, your parsnips, your carrots, a little bit of bay leaf, some salt and pepper. You're only going to saute this with the beef fat that was already rendered off. After you get just a little bit of color on your vegetables, we're actually going to deglaze this with some red wine. Oh yes, the boxed kind. I hit this with about a cup and a half worth of red wine just to make sure all that good fond is off the bottom. I saute this for an additional 5 to 10 minutes until that wine is reduced by about half. Once that wine is reduced, go ahead and take your massive steak and place it right on top of your vegetables. Now for your braising liquid, I use about 2 liters or about 35 ounces worth of beef stock. Kind of poke around the vegetables, make sure all of that liquid is incorporated. You want to make sure that your liquid comes up to about halfway up the steak. We don't want to actually cover this all the way just yet. We're going to bring this thing to a boil and then actually reduce it back to a low simmer, throw a lid on it, and let it sit for about 5 to 6 hours. Now that we have the pot roast working, we gotta focus on whatever this white liquid is. I think it's a soup, so we're gonna make soup. Cauliflower soup, to be precise. Don't jinx it! Huts. I don't know what that was about, but we gotta get this cauliflower nice and clean. To process this cauliflower, I go ahead and remove all of the root off of it, but we're gonna keep most of the stem because since we are boiling the cauliflower, all of that will be broken down in the soup. There's no need to waste it, tastes perfectly fine. Just get a nice rough chop on everything so that way it boils down at a decent rate. I'm also gonna throw in like, I don't know, 10 cloves of garlic to this. You're gonna need a pretty large pot for this. Add in a little bit of oil and just pile in all of your vegetables, all of your cauliflower, all of your garlic, and all of those diced onions we also did earlier. Hit this with a good amount of salt and pepper because cauliflower can take it. Give this a good stir, keep it over about a medium heat so you don't get too much color on your vegetables. Now normally I would deglaze this with white wine, but since we've been making so much Food Wars food, I have a ton of cooking sake left, so we're gonna use that instead. Add about a cup of cooking sake or white wine just to deglaze the bottom of that pan. Since Meowster Chef is going on break, we're gonna finish this soup. To your soup, we're gonna add about 1 liter worth of water, or about 32 ounces. Feel free to use vegetable stock if you have it. I didn't, so I'm using water. Use spirit fingers to bring this to a boil. Once it starts boiling, bring it back down to a simmer, throw a lid on it, and let it hang out until that cauliflower gets cooked. After about an hour, hour and a half, test that cauliflower. Once it's kind of mush, you're ready to start blending this. Using a hand blender, get this thing super pureed. You want this to be incredibly creamy once it's done. No chunks, no big cauliflower pieces, just beautiful, creamy soup. Okay, the pot roast is done, the soup is done. Now we have to focus on whatever this is. I think it's au gratin potatoes. So with au gratin potatoes, you actually do want to make sure that all of your slices are relatively the same thickness, and you don't want them too thin, otherwise it will disintegrate. You don't want them too thick, otherwise they don't cook properly. It's a very particular recipe. If you have a mandolin or a Japanese mandolin, go ahead and use that to get the same consistent cuts. I don't have one, so I'm just going to cut them by hand. After cutting all these by hand, we have a nice pile of potatoes that are hopefully around the same size. Take those julienne onions we made earlier and add them to this and give this a nice toss to make sure everything's well incorporated. Do a little flip-to-do with a cutting board and get your cheese grater. You could use pre-shredded cheese for this, but this is cheaper and it's Tillamook, which is a local brand for me, and it's delicious, so I'm gonna use this. After a bit of shredding, you wanna make sure you have fairly decent sized pieces to get good coverage on your potatoes. I shred about half of this, which comes out to about a ½ pound worth of cheese. Next, we're going to add about 2 cups or 500 milliliters worth of heavy cream straight to our onions and our potatoes. Normally, you would use milk and flour, but I like heavy cream. Hit this with salt and pepper, give it a good toss, and we're going to start layering this bad boy. In a greased baking dish, go ahead and add in just a small layer of your potato and onion mixture. Make sure it's spread out so the entire bottom is covered. Once you have enough potato mixture on the bottom, we're going to go ahead and spread out another even layer of cheese. You do want to make sure that all of your potato is covered with a good thin layer of cheese. Continue to do this until you're out of both your potatoes and your cheese. Cover this with aluminum foil. We're gonna bake this at about 325 degrees for about 2 hours. Now, this is going to vary depending on the size of your baking dish, but since mine was so deep for this actual recipe, I had to bake it for quite a while. Take a knife and insert it randomly into your casserole to check for any resistance. If there isn't any, you're good to go. Garnish your casserole with just a bit more of cheese while trying to keep the wife happy. Keep it warm in the oven until you're ready to eat. Now that we have the au gratin potatoes ready, the pot roast is working, we gotta focus on the sausages. And we're gonna need this. Use equal parts water and beer for this, just to get your sausages boiling. Since I don't have a grinder, I reached out to the company I work with at work, Revel Meat. They specialize in high quality pork products, and I absolutely love everything they have, so I figured, why not use their stuff? Give it the obligatory wiggle and drop this into your beer. Once the sausages start to float, they should be done. After you dump out your hot dog water, we're gonna sear the sausages in the same pan we used because we don't need to make another one dirty. Once the skin is nice and crispy, they're pretty much done. You remember that pot roast we started like 6 hours ago? Oh, I really wish I could share this with you guys right now. It's so good. Our soup is ready. Our pot roast is ready. Our potatoes are ready. Our sausage is ready. We got a hunk of cheese. Chef is still asleep. Let's do this. Now, I had to enlist the help of a friend to actually take down this meal because this is a ridiculous amount of food. Everything came out great, everything tasted amazing. We poured ourselves a beer, watched the wife drink our beer, and enjoyed what's supposed to be a meal for one. This is definitely a meal to share. Well, as you guys can see, you're probably gonna need some help to eat all of this food because this is kind of ridiculous. My question to you, what is your favorite weapon in Monster Hunter? Mine is probably the insect glaive because it just seems so fancy. My name is Chef PK, here on Chef Paul Reacts. Get subscribed and remember, keep playing with your food.